Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our presentation today. I'm John Fink, for those who don't know, the CEO and President of Aloha United Way, and I want to get right into our topic for today, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an update of what's been going on with AUW. First of all, as some of you know, we were able to immediately support the Maui relief efforts. We did that Wednesday morning, right after the fire on August 8th. We set up a fund sending employees to Maui to support the Maui United Way. We sent over 20 laptops. We basically took over the IT portion of it to get the back room stuff all set up for Maui United Way, which some of you know is an independent entity. They are not part of Aloha United Way. We are independent, as is Kauai Island United Way and Hawaii Island United Way. So we worked in partnership with Maui United Way to create an emergency assistance program. And our goal was to get $1,000 out to as many people as we could, as quickly as we could. And through AUW, we have had over 17,000 people donate, and we were able to give $2.8 million in the first month to Maui United Way, which went to 2,800 people at $1,000 each. So we're very happy about that. We will continue to support Maui United Way. Their next efforts will be in getting to the actual nonprofit agencies they work with to make sure that those people in the most need are helped as we enter, I guess you would say, phase 2 of the recovery effort over on Maui. And it's only because of generous donors like yourselves that we were not only able to respond so quickly and deploy resources to those in need, but to know that we will get the community help that we need to help our friends over on Maui. So thank you for doing that and helping us get money out to people in dire need immediately. The second thing I wanted to update you on is our ALICE program. We are in year 2 of our 3-year cohort with 17 other local nonprofits. We will have a report coming out in the next couple of weeks. We will certainly make that available to you, but it will tell you what progress we've made in the first year plus of the program with this group of entities, where we are right now, what we've done, and also where we're going in the next year. So we will do that, and we will move forward on ALICE. Our 211, we have ramped up. We have hired extra people to help out. As you can imagine, once Maui situation kicked in, we have had a lot of work to do helping them and getting people to the resources they need. 211 is a statewide service, so we do cover all the islands with a simple 211 call or via text or via email, so we can always respond to people very quickly, and we will continue to do so going forward. As you can imagine, the first couple of weeks, there were all kinds of calls and a lot of frantic people, and our staff did an amazing job handling people and providing as much information and certainly comfort as they could while sending them to the right resources they needed to help themselves out, no matter what their situations were. So very proud, as always, of the 211 folks at United Way. With that, I'd like to move forward. First of all, I want to really thank our Tocqueville co-chair, Jim Polk, from Bank of Hawaii, for arranging our time with Dave Specht today. Dave is the director of the Drucker School Global Family Business Institute. His professional mission is to preserve families and perpetuate businesses. Not a bad goal, Dave. He is the author of The Family Business Whisperer. He is a thought leader on topics surrounding generational continuity of family-owned businesses and family wealth. Prior to his current role, he trained 2,500 top advisors and bankers at Wells Fargo Private Bank on family dynamics and generational wealth issues. So he's done this before. Prior to his work at the bank, he founded Advising Generations, a consulting firm, and established the Family Business Management program at the University of Nebraska. Go Huskers. During college, he attended BYU Hawaii, where he played on the basketball team. And hopefully that will come back someday, Dave. Dave lives in Washington State with his wife and his 6 kids. So without any further ado, Dave Specht.
John, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have some slides to share. It is fantastic to be back in Hawaii, both physically and virtually at the same time with you guys. I'm in Honolulu doing some work with the Bank of Hawaii, and so grateful Jim invited me to participate. I have fond memories of Hawaii. Our family was, my wife and I moved here to Hawaii when we were just married and chasing that basketball dream. So Hawaii has a really special place in my heart. So I will go ahead and get going here. We're going to talk about raising experience-rich children, and also maximizing the joy of giving. I felt like that was a fantastic introduction. I live in Washington State, but depending on the day, I'm in a different state. So I'm glad to be in Hawaii today. I have 6 kids, and that may influence why I do what I do, because I do believe that the preservation of families is most important, and perpetuating businesses is right behind that. And I'm lucky to have a job to do those things. So I want to have you consider a few questions as we move through our time today. The first one is, in what ways has financial success simplified parenting for you? Obviously, it's important that we have the resources that our families need, but at some point, it seems like the financial success can also complement our job as parents. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Second, in what ways has financial success complicated that role as a parent? And then finally, what is one thing that keeps you up at night regarding your role as a parent? So as we're working through the slides today in our conversation, I'd ask you to consider those things. Now, this is a picture of my kids many years ago. And I feel like it's indicative of a few things. One, shared ownership. Many of you either have families that have businesses or are in shared ownership situations or are considering shared ownership for your kids. And oftentimes it probably feels like this picture looks, how one is pulling the wagon and others are maybe along for the ride. But these 6 kids have given me the opportunity to think a lot about parenting and what is actually helpful, and maybe sometimes what is not helpful. So I'm going to give you a few things to consider. I'm going to give you 6 things that I would say help us to raise our children with batteries included. Nothing more frustrating than a gift that does not include the batteries. And we want these children to be able to move forward empowered and on their own and independent and feeling confident. So I'm going to give you these 6 things, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the joy of giving as well. The first is, do they know where they are from? In my work with family-owned businesses, many times the first place we start is by helping them understand their heritage and understanding the story of their family, whether it was an immigration story or the story of how they began the business. And what that does for a child is it provides context. They may be a generation or 2 removed from what we'll call the financial struggle, but as they learn about their history and as they learn about their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, it oftentimes puts in context their life, and it's really helpful to them. So that's the first one. First key to raising children with batteries included is helping them know where they're from. Children that know more about their families and family history are more resilient and tend to be better when facing challenges in life. There's been a number of studies on this, and learning our family history, knowing and having our kids know how to tell their own family history does a lot for them to encouraging their own resilience and understanding who they are. The second one is, are they grateful? I like to say gratitude and entitlement are incompatible roommates. And many of us complain that our children may be acting in an entitled way, or they're becoming entitled little brats. And I wrote a paper on entitlement, and I wrote it, and the title of it is "Entitlement Begins with Me." And it was really for me as a parent to think about, what are the choices that I'm making that are creating entitlement in these children that I have. And one of the things that I've noticed is that when I am grateful, I do not feel so entitled. And so if you find entitlement creeping in, whether it's in your own personal life or with your kids or your grandkids, my advice is to ramp up the gratitude. My mom used to do this thing when we were growing up. Every evening we would eat dinner together, and she called them new and goods. And this was a little frustrating and annoying as a kid, but what she was doing was she was programming our little brains to look for what was good and what was new in our lives. So she would ask us before we could eat our dinner, "Dave, what's something new that you learned today? And what's something good that happened to you?" And what I noticed was that when she could get us to look for things that we were grateful for, we it put in proper context, maybe the challenges or the frustrations of the day. So that's number 2. Are they grateful? Number 3 is, do they have ambitious goals or pursuits? For me, one of my goals growing up as a kid was to play college basketball. And I had many people tell me, hey, Dave, maybe you should set a different goal. You are not very fast and can't jump very high. Maybe you should set a different goal. But ultimately, this goal of chasing down a dream to play college basketball was something that's translated into many, many different areas of my life. And what I've learned in working with clients, especially those clients that have significant financial means, is I find that their kids are happiest when they have something to chase, when they have a goal, whether it's sports, music, academics. They need to have a target to aim at. And so ultimately, they need to have some goals and have an ambitious pursuit. And again, it's encouraging them to chase down dreams, chase down goals that will ultimately help them to find their way. I also like to say everyone needs a goal or a dream to chase. And if they don't have a target, they will wander and wonder. And it may be in our own families that we've seen some of this wandering and wondering, but ultimately it's for us as parents and as grandparents to encourage our children and grandchildren to pick a goal and to chase a goal. And maybe that goal doesn't stick long term, but ultimately the pursuit of an ambitious goal will help them along the way to find their way and to be of benefit to society. Number 4 is, do they have grit or resilience to thrive as an adult? So gratitude, goals, and grit, those are the 3 G's. I'd like to tell you a story about grit. My son, his name is Reichert, and he was a freshman. He's a senior now, but he was a freshman in high school, and he had a goal to get straight A's in high school. And we were helping him by checking his grades, and it was coming close to the end of the semester, and we noticed that he was going to get something other than an A in one of his classes. And so we looked at what his assignments were, and it showed that he was missing an assignment, and it was a big one. And he said, Dad, I know that I turned it in. I promised you and Mom I turned it in. And so his mom and I had a choice. We could call the teacher and on his behalf argue for him, or we could ask him the question, well, Reichert, what do you want to do about that? And ultimately, I was proud of us that day in our parenting because we didn't swoop in and save. We helped him to think about how he would talk to adults, how he would plead his case and prove that he had turned in his assignment. And what happened there was that he developed a level of confidence in his ability to stick up for himself, to be able to talk to adults with respect. But ultimately, I think that what he was doing that day was developing grit. And ultimately, as an entrepreneur or as a leader, anyone that has had success, you know that the success hasn't come easy. It's usually come after we've failed many, many times. And so ultimately, this is number 4 for me, raising children with batteries included. We need to encourage grit. And I like to remind families that you cannot bequest grit in a will or in a trust. Grit is to be earned, and it is to be developed over time. And so I encourage you to think about, in what ways can you help your kids and your grandkids to develop that grit or resilience? As a parent, we want to save them from hard things, and sometimes we want their life to be better or more comfortable than ours. But you would not be who you are and have arrived at where you have arrived if you weren't resilient and had some grit. So let's not rob our kids of development of that grit. Number 5 is, what is your child's relationship with money? We all have our own money stories, whether it was growing up with little and that coloring how we felt about money, or maybe it was growing up with a lot. Maybe we grew up with a father who was gone a lot. And maybe we attribute his financial success to him not being involved as we would like him to, maybe in our sports or in our daily activities. And so we each have our own money stories and our own relationship with money. And I would just ask you to consider, to think about, what choices are you making as a parent or a grandparent to impact the relationship your child has with money? I think being able to talk openly and honestly about our own relationship with money and how it developed can go a long ways to our children having, a healthy relationship with money. So just a quick review. Do they know where they're from? Number 2, are they grateful? Number 3, do they have an ambitious pursuit or a goal? Number 4, do they have the grit or resilience to thrive as an adult? And finally, number 5, do they have a good relationship with money, and how are we helping them to develop that relationship? Number 6 is, are we investing time with them? Ultimately, my kids don't really care, after I provide for their basic needs, how much money we have. They want my attention and they want my time. And your kids and your grandkids want the same from you. So spending time with our kids is something that will probably be what they value most. The Christmas presents that we buy, those are fun, but they probably will forget about those. The time that we invest in creating experience-rich kids and helping them to have memories with us is probably the investment that we need to make the most. So those are the 6 keys to raising a thriving next generation and raising kids with batteries included. I wanted to now just share 3 keys to maximizing the joy of giving. And I'll share these 3, and then we'll go into a little greater detail with each of them. One of the keys that I've seen in working with the clients that I work with is those that have clarified their giving purpose are the ones that typically are the happiest. And we'll talk about that in greater detail in just a second. Second, I think it's important to understand the giving options. And these options will change and vary depending on our life stage and where we're at. And then third, how do we use giving as a teaching tool? So first of all, how do we clarify our giving purpose? Clayton Christensen, the Harvard professor, talked about 2 types of strategies: deliberate strategies and emerging strategies. I think it's really important that as you think about giving and how you give of your time, your talents, your treasure, that we have a deliberate strategy. It's really important to do this because you're going to be asked to make donations more times than you're going to be able to say yes. And if you have a deliberate strategy, it can help you to feel good about the yeses that you can say and feel like you have a specific purpose in the way that you give. I would say it's also important for you to be open to emerging strategies of how you give, whether, again, of your treasure or your time or your talents. But I think it's really crucial that you have a strategy. And I'll give you one example. One of my clients is particularly involved in the aviation industry. And so they wanted their giving strategy to be connected with their business. They're in the aviation business, but they also wanted those dollars to somehow benefit their employees and also stay in the local community. And so their giving strategy and their giving commitment was to local education initiatives, and it's to they have a scholarship program for the children of their employees and those that want to get into the aviation industry. And I just thought they were a great example of a family that had developed a strategy that was connected not only to their desires, but it also connected to their business. And I know not all of our giving strategies need to be connected to our business, but that was an example that I thought of that they did a really good job of. So now I want to talk about the 4 T's of giving. And when I think about the 4 T's of giving, I think of it almost like an asset allocation strategy. At some point in our lives, all we have to give was our time. And then we develop some skills, and then perhaps what we can give, and that is maybe most valuable to a nonprofit or to a cause, is our talent. Maybe we develop a talent that they can use. The third T is ties, or our connections and our network. And I think this is often underestimated when it comes to giving. Our network and the people that we know are often our most valuable asset. And so as you think about the causes that you give to, I would ask that you not just think about your money. I would ask you to think about how can you contribute your connections, your ties? How can you contribute your talent to that organization? And maybe it is that you can give your time to that organization. How you allocate your giving will likely, again, evolve in your life stage. Maybe at this point in your life or in your career, it's easiest to write a check to an organization to be helpful. There's others, at other times in my life, again, all I had to give was my time. And I think as you think about raising that experience-rich next generation, I think we should open our eyes to the fact that they can begin to give very early. Maybe it isn't that they can give their money or of family funds, but I would encourage you to think about the other three T's and how you can encourage the rising generation to get involved in causes, to start to invest their time, their talents, and their network to causes that they care about. So those are the three T's of giving. And then finally, how do we use giving as a teaching tool? The first thing I would say is how we give oftentimes assigns meaning to our money. Now, what I mean by that is when my kids see where I'm donating, whether it's to my church or to a cause or to a family over the holiday season, I don't have to say anything to my kids, but as they see how I'm giving money or how I'm giving my time, that immediately assigns value to our kids on how we feel about our money and how we use our funds and our resources. The second tool I would say is to include the rising generation, especially as you begin to give funds to different organizations. Include them in your own due diligence. Include them in conversations about giving. Help them to understand why you give to the causes that you give to. And then I think maybe most importantly is be curious about what they would give to if they had resources to give or an allocation of time. I would ask them, if you had 10 hours in a week, what cause would you want to give your time and your talents to? I promise you that those are the types of conversations that will allow you to, again, assign meaning to the money and show that you are a steward. And again, those conversations with our kids are really helpful. Another opportunity to assign, meaning to our money and also using giving as a teaching tool is to include our rising generation in establishing a junior board. There's a family that I work with that wanted to get their kids involved earlier, maybe than others had. And so they established a junior board. At a certain age, they could be included in the board. And ultimately, that junior board was allocated a percentage of the dollar amount or a specific dollar amount. And then they learned as young people how to bring causes up and to be able to talk about those causes with their cousins or their siblings. They could talk about and do due diligence together. And then they could ultimately make decisions and give to those to those in need of those resources. So I'm a fan of allocating some dollar amount or percentage to that junior board and allowing them to have some experiences with giving early on. And then finally, I think it's really important that we also seek an accounting of the impact. And this shows not only to the receivers of the gift, but also to our rising generation that there are expectations that we have of outcomes. And so again, the way that we give assigns meaning to our money, and oftentimes that's unspoken. It's just by our actions. Second include that rising generation in our due diligence and in conversations about how we give and why we give. Finally, you might consider an allocation to an establishment of a junior board so that you can involve them early and also incorporate some of the causes that they care about alongside the causes that you care about. And then encourage them and for you as well to seek an accounting of the impact that those dollars or the time that they've spent is making on the lives of those that receive those gifts. So in conclusion, I would just ask that you consider, those keys to raising children with batteries included: gratitude, goals, and grit. Ultimately raising a rising generation that can be good stewards of not only the money that has been made, but in the community where we give of our time and our talents. And I would encourage you to review your allocation of the 4 T's in connection with how you give. And as you do that, I think you'll be fulfilled in knowing that when it is time and when it is appropriate to give money, then you can do that with a grateful heart. But in those other instances where it may be of your time or your talents or of your connections, that those are also very worthwhile giving ways. So I want to open it up now for questions. And Emily, if you have questions that have come into the chat, I would be happy to take on any of those questions, and I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
That was great, Dave. Thank you so much. We do have a few questions. So the first one, at what age can children understand giving as a teaching tool? Any suggestions for young children?
So I have a personal story with this one. I was going to try to model giving. My oldest daughter was then 4 years old, and we were at the beach, and there was a man who was homeless, and it was a cold day. And so I decided that I was going to model for her giving by buying this man a meal. And so I went and I got the meal and I brought it to him, and she was sitting in the car waiting for me with her mom and her brother. And I came back to the car feeling pretty good about myself, Emily, and she humbled me. She said, "Dad, can I give him my blanket?" And if any of you have had children that have a special blanket, you know just probably what that did to my heart. And it was hard for me to do, but I allowed her to give her blanket to that homeless man, and she taught me that day. So you really can't start too early. She was probably 4 or 5, Emily, but my attempt to teach her, she taught me a great lesson. So start early.
Love that story. Thank you. Another question from one of our donors: how can I encourage grandparents to participate in the 3 Gs when they freely give money as gifts?
This is tough because grandparents are entitled to spoil kids, right? But I think it's important that we have conversations with those grandparents about what are the things that we're trying to teach our kids, and how we can involve those grandparents in driving those lessons home. And it may be in how they give and how they share of their abundance with our kids. But I do think there are conversations that need to happen between parents and grandparents so they can be on the same page, and so that parents don't feel like grandparents are kind of undercutting them, maybe in the ways that we want to teach our kids. That's a tough one though, Emily. It's a tough one because when you're a grandparent, you feel like, hey, I've worked hard and I want to spoil these grandkids and then return them to your house once I'm done spoiling them.
That's right. That's right. I'm sure many of us have heard that before. It is challenging. Another question is, what is the worst instance of entitlement in a rich child or experienced rich child that you've seen, and how did the parents deal with that?
Okay. So again, I don't believe entitlement starts with the children. I believe entitlement starts with the parents, and we create lifestyle expectations for our children. So we need to be careful in the choices that we're making and how we are, how we are influencing whether they feel entitled or whether they feel grateful. Some of the worst instances are those kids that grow up with very little confidence because they were never given the opportunity to develop grit, because mom and dad would always swoop in and save, or they would always, when they would come up short with funds, maybe when they were at college, or they made bad decisions in high school with their money, and we would, make up the difference always and never allow them to suffer kind of the natural consequences of bad choices. So there's many instances of entitlement creeping in, but I would say for us as parents or as grandparents, I think the best thing we can do is look at the choices that we're making and decide, how are my choices influencing whether I'm developing a rising generation with gratitude, goals, and grit, or am I raising them to feel entitled that the world owes them something? Again, a tough one.
Here's another question, Dave. Have you had conflicts with adult children in whom to give money to? If so, how was that handled?
Okay, so the question is with adult children and how to give money.
Or who to give money to.
Or who to give money to. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of times where the money looks like a fixed pie. And when children see their parents giving gifts, whether to the United Way or to a family member that needs it, many times those kids can feel like, well, they're taking directly from my inheritance, so they can feel a certain sort of way. Again, I think it really is important for us to give meaning to the money and to talk about the purpose for which the family has worked so hard to accumulate that, and then to also assign a strategy for why you give the money the way you do. I think it's important, though, that we do hear our kids when they do have those concerns, and allow them to voice those concerns. And ultimately, if we do it right, likely they will be inheriting the stewardship of those assets as well. And so I think it's important to have those open conversations, and when there isn't alignment, that there's a way to have conversation about it.
Sure. Thank you. So this is an interesting one. Fostering a giving mentality with our kids is also instilling the value of money with them, so they don't have an entitlement issue. How do we as parents prevent our children from thinking that they will inherit money and foster a work ethic in them so that they can achieve success on their own?
It's a good one. So a wise man once told me, if my children don't inherit my values, my valuables will be of little benefit to them in their life. And what he meant by that was, I need to teach them correct principles, and ultimately the money will magnify their good traits, and it will magnify their bad traits as well. Can you repeat that question again? I think I got a little sideways on that.
Sure. So fostering a giving mentality with our kids is also instilling the value of money with them so they don't have entitlement issues. How do we as parents prevent our children from thinking they will inherit money and foster a work ethic in them so they can achieve success on their own?
Okay. So as parents, we do create expectations by what we say. So if we're saying things like, someday, honey, this will all be yours, or someday you'll inherit the business, we are creating those expectations. Now, for my kids, we've created the expectation that they will pay for their own school, their own college, and they will pay for their mission. We started that very early, but we also we have a matching program in our family. So whatever they're willing to save for college or for their mission, we will match it 100%. So that was our little effort to be able to say, we want them to own what college is going to be like for them. We want them to feel fully invested, but we also want to contribute to them being able to make their goal. So again, it's the little things of how we talk about, and create expectations that I think, goes a long way to what the kids think about what they'll receive and what they won't receive.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Last question that I'm seeing in the chat. Please feel free, audience, if you want to put anything else in the Q&A. Do you have any personal experience in teaching moments when you thought you were right, but reflected back on and realized you might have been wrong? I've noticed a lot of parents having a hard time admitting when they might have been wrong, and that being a big defining factor to the child's mentality.
Yeah, that's quite a question. I mean, if you're a parent, you know you've been wrong a lot of times because your kids remind you, they remind you of it. But one of the most powerful things you can do as a parent, and I have experience with this, is apologizing to your child and saying, you know what, Mom and I thought this was going to be good for you, and we apologize. It was not actually good for you. So we're not going to continue making that choice. And I'll give you an example. We weren't sure how to handle technology with our kids. You know, every kid wants a cell phone, and it becomes earlier and earlier and earlier. And we had an experience with technology with our oldest that we didn't really like. And rather than blaming her for bad choices with the technology, we went to her and we apologized. And we said, you know what, Mom and I made a mistake with how we incorporated technology into your life. And so anyways, it resulted in our kids get cell phones when they are a senior in high school and not before. And that sounds probably pretty harsh to many on the call, but my oldest two have really thanked me because it kept them from some of the unique challenges that having unfettered access to technology has, in junior high or even earlier. So, but we approached it as going to her and saying, we're sorry that we made a mistake, rather than, pointing the finger of shame at her and saying, you did this wrong and you should change. So that's how we did it. Hopefully okay.
I'm gonna share that with my 12-year-old daughter. I like
Good
that.
luck. Good luck, Emily.
We have another question that came through from one of our donors. When is it too late to retrain and reteach as to family history, gratitude, goals, and pursuits? How best to do it if you're starting, not as early as you would have liked, but even as adults?
Yeah, I would say it's never too late. There may be something that you learn in your own family history as an adult that changes your own perspective on how you feel about your parents or your grandparents or the success that your family has had. And so I don't think it's ever too late. I think it's an opportunity to, again, revisit. And ultimately, family stories need to be told over and over and over again anyways. So there's not a one time, that if you do it when they're, if you help them learn their stories of their grandparents when they're 12, they're always going to remember them. It needs to be a pattern. And ultimately, the opportunity that we have with multiple generations is maybe we didn't do a good job with our kids in teaching them about their ancestors and where that grit came from and where that resilience came from. But as a grandparent, we might say, you know what, we'd really love to be involved in teaching our grandkids about the history and where we come from. And so it's an opportunity, without saying we want to teach you, our children, our adult children, it's a way to teach the grandchildren, but at the same time, your own children are going to be hearing those stories and the context that you bring to your family and what you've created. There's an opportunity. So it's never too late.
Great. So we have another question. Religion oftentimes fits into the giving philosophy. What if I'm not religious?
Well, I think it's just a part of a strategy. So again, this family that I was working with that developed their strategy towards, giving in the aviation business and giving and really investing in their employees, they were not religious. And that was the strategy that worked for them. They felt great about it as a family. So, I think religion can be, a place where funds end up going. For our family, 10% of our income goes to a religious affiliation. But again, I don't think it's necessary that that's a part of it. I think it's something that oftentimes is very important, to someone that has a religious background and they end up tying their dollars and how they give to that religious organization. But yeah, if you don't have religion in your life, then find causes that you love and you care about, and make a strategic effort to aligning your time, your talents, and your treasures to giving to those causes. And there's a lot of people in the world that need a lot of love and kindness and generosity. And again, that doesn't have to be connected to a religious affiliation.
And I love that, Dave. And if it's okay for me to share as well, we have many donors and many people in the community that give to causes that they're passionate about, whether it's, youth development or youth in crisis, or even, female empowerment. So there's so many different really good causes and work out there. So it really, I think, behooves you to just, what is your passion? If there was one thing that you could do when you're not working, if there's one thing you could, one place you could be or where you could help out, what would that look like to you? And I think that'll kind of lead you to the answer of, what drives you and where do you want to leave your legacy?
And I would also say, Emily, don't put too much pressure on yourself to have to say, well, this is my strategy. This is the one thing. Like our interests change, our passions change. Maybe it is someone that ends up with cancer in our family that shifts our giving from one thing to cancer research, and that is something that maybe wasn't on the radar before. But so I would say be kind to yourself. Not, you don't have to feel like you have to set your giving priority forever. But I think putting a strategy together for now and then being open to those emergent strategies, I think is really helpful.
Fantastic. I think that wraps up our questions. Thank you so much for all of our donors and participants. Dave, a huge mahalo to you for spending your Tuesday afternoon with us. So good to have you here in Hawaii as well. Oh, looks like we have one more question that snuck through, which is great. Just someone saying thank you so much. I learned a lot. Very informative. So truly appreciate the time. Just a quick note for all of our donors, we will have this recorded and on our website on Friday. If you have any questions or need help with your end of year giving, please don't hesitate to reach out. We know we're getting close to that time. Ellen, John, myself make ourselves available to you. We are also looking forward to our annual in-person event that'll happen November 29th at the Mariposa. So more information on that to come. But for the time being, again, thank you so much for joining us today. And on behalf of Dave, John, and Jim, aloha and mahalo so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
for having me.
everybody.